The lawyer's smirk cut through the sterile conference room like a blade. I sat across from my husband Kyle and his attorney, watching as the man dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "Mrs. Bennett, let's be realistic here. You were just a housewife. You contributed nothing financially to this marriage. A modest settlement and the minivan seem more than fair." His tone dripped with condescension, each word designed to make me feel small and worthless. Kyle sat beside him, staring at the table, unable to meet my eyes. The man I had loved for 15 years couldn't even look at me while his lawyer tried to destroy what little dignity I had left. I smiled calmly, feeling the weight of the thick folder in my hands. The folder that contained 2 years of careful documentation, photographs of hidden documents, bank records, property deeds, and evidence of systematic fraud. I slid it across the polished table toward Judge Morrison, who had been observing the proceedings with patient neutrality. "Your Honor, I believe you'll find this information relevant to our case." The judge opened the folder and began reading. I watched the lawyer's smirk falter as the judge's eyebrows rose higher with each page. Kyle finally looked up, confusion crossing his face, then something else. Fear. Pure, undeniable fear. The lawyer leaned forward, trying to see what the judge was reading, and I saw the exact moment his confidence shattered. His face went pale, and he cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, perhaps we could request a brief recess to review these documents?" I kept smiling, my hands folded calmly in my lap, as everything Kyle and his lawyer had carefully planned began to crumble around them. 6 months earlier, my life looked perfect from the outside. I was Claire Bennett, married to Kyle Bennett, one of the most successful real estate developers in the city. We lived in a beautiful 5-bedroom house in the suburbs with our 2 children, Emma, who was 15, and Tyler, who was 12. Every evening, Kyle came home to a perfectly maintained house, a home-cooked meal, and children whose homework was done and activities were organized. I managed every aspect of our household with precision. I coordinated the schedules, handled the finances I was allowed to see, planned and hosted elaborate dinner parties that helped Kyle's business connections flourish, and made sure our family appeared flawless to the world. Friends and neighbors constantly commented on how lucky I was to have such a successful husband, how wonderful our marriage seemed, how perfectly balanced our life appeared. What they didn't see were the cracks forming beneath the surface, the distance growing between us, the way Kyle spent more and more nights working late at the office. I told myself it was just the pressure of business, that his distraction was temporary, that we were still the team we had always been. I had given up my own career as a financial analyst to support his dreams, to raise our children, to build the foundation that allowed him to succeed. Everyone saw me as just a housewife. But I knew the truth. I was the infrastructure that made everything else possible. The night everything changed started like any other. I woke up around 2 in the morning feeling thirsty and decided to get some water from the kitchen. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed light coming from under Kyle's study door. That wasn't unusual since he often worked late, but something made me pause outside the door. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe I had been ignoring signs for too long. His voice drifted through the wood, low and confident, filled with a tone I rarely heard anymore when he spoke to me. "She has absolutely no idea about any of it. The offshore accounts, the properties in Mom's name, the separate LLC. Nothing." He laughed, and the sound made my blood run cold. "Once the divorce is final, she'll be lucky if she gets enough to rent a decent apartment. My lawyer says we can lowball the settlement since she hasn't worked in years and has no way to prove what assets actually exist." I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, feeling like the floor was tilting beneath my feet. Divorce. He was planning to divorce me, and he had been strategizing how to leave me with nothing. "Natasha, baby, once this is over, we can finally be together properly. No more hiding." My heart stopped. Natasha, his business partner, the woman I had welcomed into our home, cooked dinner for, treated as a friend. I stood there in the darkness of the hallway, listening to my husband laugh about destroying my life, and something inside me hardened into steel. The next morning, I went through the motions of normal life as if nothing had happened. I made breakfast, got the kids ready for school, smiled when Kyle kissed my cheek before leaving for work. But inside, my mind was racing with questions and fears. How long had this been going on? How much had he hidden from me? Was everything I thought I knew about our life together a lie? As I was cleaning up the breakfast dishes, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding as I read the words. Your husband isn't who you think he is. Check the locked filing cabinet in his office, third drawer. Password is your wedding date backwards. My hands trembled as I held the phone. Who had sent this? Why were they helping me? Was this a trap? But as I stood there in my kitchen remembering Kyle's voice from last night, his casual cruelty as he planned my destruction, I realized I had nothing to lose by looking. If this was real, I needed to know the truth. If it was a trap, well, I was already caught in one. I had two choices. I could pretend I never saw the message, continue playing the oblivious wife until Kyle served me with divorce papers and took everything. Or I could fight back. I deleted the text, took a deep breath, and waited for Kyle to leave for his afternoon meetings. My hands shook as I entered Kyle's study that afternoon. This room had always been his private domain, the one place in our house where I rarely ventured unless invited. Now I stood before his filing cabinet, the locked steel drawer mocking me with its secrets. I pulled out my phone and calculated our wedding date backwards. 07132008 became 8002317. The lock clicked open. Inside were manila folders, organized with meticulous precision, each one labeled with codes I didn't recognize at first. Then I started opening them. And the scope of Kyle's deception began to reveal itself in damning detail. Bank statements for accounts I had never seen, showing deposits and transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Property deeds for investment homes I didn't know we owned, all purchased over the past 5 years, none of them in our joint names. Offshore investment documents showing accounts in the Cayman Islands with balances that made my head spin. Partnership agreements for LLCs I had never heard of, all showing Kyle as the primary stakeholder. This wasn't just hidden money. This was a systematic, deliberate construction of a secret financial empire. While I had been managing our household on the modest allowance Kyle provided, calling it tight budgeting and careful money management, he had been building wealth I never knew existed. Every business dinner I had hosted, every connection I had helped him make, every sacrifice I had made for his career had contributed to this hidden fortune. And he had planned to divorce me while making sure I never saw a penny of it. I was about to close the drawer when I noticed a small phone charger plugged into an outlet behind the filing cabinet. Following the cord, I found a second cell phone tucked into the back corner of the drawer. My stomach churned as I powered it on, already knowing what I would find, but needing to see the proof. The messages loaded slowly, each one another nail in the coffin of my marriage. 3 years of texts between Kyle and Natasha, his business partner, his affair partner, his co-conspirator. The affair itself was painful enough, reading intimate messages that showed a relationship that had been going on under my nose while I played the devoted wife. But what made my blood boil was the calculated planning I found in those texts. They hadn't just been having an affair. They had been strategizing my destruction. Messages from 2 years ago showed them discussing how to hide assets before filing for divorce. Natasha suggesting offshore accounts. Kyle joking about keeping me in the dark. Texts about forming separate business entities to shield money from community property laws. Messages about timing the divorce for maximum financial advantage. They had even discussed using my devotion to our children as leverage, knowing I would prioritize their stability over fighting for money. She'll roll over if we make it about protecting the kids from a messy divorce, Natasha had written. Exactly, Kyle had responded. Claire always puts them first. We can use that. I carefully photographed every message, every document, working methodically despite the tears blurring my vision. They had underestimated me completely. They thought I was just a housewife, too naive and too dependent to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That night, I lay awake beside Kyle, listening to him breathe, feeling like I was sleeping next to a stranger. Every instinct screamed at me to confront him, to throw the evidence in his face and demand answers. But I forced myself to think strategically rather than emotionally. If I confronted Kyle now, he would know I had discovered his plans. He would change tactics, hide evidence better, maybe accelerate the divorce timeline before I could prepare. I would lose any advantage I currently had. No, if Kyle had spent 2 years preparing to destroy me, then I needed to prepare my own case just as carefully. I needed allies, I needed expert help, and I needed to document everything without tipping him off. The next morning, after Kyle left for work and the kids were at school, I made a phone call I hadn't made in years. Patricia Huang had been my roommate in college when I was studying financial analysis. We had lost touch after I married Kyle and left my career behind, but I knew she had become a forensic accountant, someone who specialized in finding hidden money in divorce cases. She agreed to meet me that afternoon at a coffee shop across town, away from anywhere Kyle might see us. When I showed her the photographs of the documents I had found, her eyes widened with professional interest. "Claire, this isn't just hiding assets. This is systematic financial fraud. He's been building a parallel financial life completely separate from your marital estate. I can help you trace every penny, but we need to be extremely careful. If he suspects you're onto him, he'll move everything offshore where it's much harder to recover." I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. "Tell me what to do." Over the next weeks, I became an actress in my own life. Every morning, I woke up and played the role of Claire, the devoted wife, Claire, the perfect mother, Claire, the oblivious housewife who had no idea her world was about to explode. I smiled when Kyle came home. I cooked his favorite meals. I asked about his day with genuine interest. I attended his business functions and charmed his associates exactly as I always had. But at night, after everyone was asleep, I became someone else entirely. I downloaded banking software and created spreadsheets tracking every financial discrepancy I could find. I photographed documents when Kyle was in the shower or taking out the trash. I met secretly with Patricia, who was building a forensic analysis of Kyle's hidden empire. I consulted with Helen Park, the divorce attorney Patricia recommended, a woman with a reputation for decimating opposing counsel who underestimated her. Helen had looked at my evidence with sharp, calculating eyes and said simply, "We're going to destroy him, but we need more. We need to catch them in active fraud, not just past concealment." So I kept digging, kept documenting, kept playing my role. I attended dinners where Natasha was present and smiled warmly at her, knowing she was sleeping with my husband and planning my financial ruin. I hosted parties in our home where guests praised Kyle's business acumen, never knowing I was memorizing every detail they revealed about his deals. I was patient, methodical, and absolutely determined. They thought I was powerless. They had no idea I was building a case that would burn their plans to ashes. 2 months into my silent investigation, Patricia called with news that made my heart race. "I've been tracking the property records like you asked. Your husband has been buying investment properties over the past 5 years, but they're not in his name or in joint names with you. They're registered under his mother's name, Diane Bennett." I felt my stomach drop. Kyle's mother, who had always treated me with cool politeness, who had never quite approved of me, had been helping her son hide assets from me. "There are 6 properties total," Patricia continued, her voice tight with professional anger. 3 rental homes, 2 commercial buildings, and 1 vacation condo. Based on current market values, we're looking at approximately $3.2 million in real estate that should be considered community property since they were purchased during your marriage with marital funds. $3.2 million. Hidden in his mother's name. Purchased with money from the business I had helped him build by hosting dinners, making connections, running our household so he could focus on work. I met with Patricia and Helen that evening, laying out the property records on Helen's conference table. Helen studied the documents with the intensity of a predator spotting weakness in prey. "This is good, Claire. Very good. But we need documentation showing the money trail. We need to prove the properties were purchased with marital funds, not gifts from his mother or his separate property from before the marriage." So we kept digging, tracing wire transfers, matching dates of property purchases with business profits, building an ironclad case that every brick and board of Kyle's hidden empire belonged to both of us. 4 months into my investigation, Kyle came home early one evening with an expression I had never seen before. Cold, determined, rehearsed. He found me in the kitchen preparing dinner and said, without preamble, "Claire, we need to talk. I want a divorce." I gripped the edge of the counter, letting myself show shock and pain that wasn't entirely feigned despite being expected. "What? Kyle, where is this coming from?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. "I've been unhappy for a long time. We've grown apart. This isn't working anymore. I've already consulted with a lawyer. I'll have him send over the paperwork." My voice shook convincingly. "Just like that? After 15 years? What about the kids? What about us?" "The kids will be fine. We'll share custody. I've had my lawyer draft a settlement that's fair for everyone." He finally looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw pity mixed with dismissal. He thought I would crumble, would beg, would accept whatever scraps he offered. "You have 1 week to find a lawyer. Let's try to keep this civil." After he left the room, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of genuine tears. Then I pulled out my phone and texted Helen. "He just filed. It's time." Her response was immediate. "Perfect. Let them think they've won. Don't react. Don't fight yet. Let me see their opening offer first." That night, I lay in the guest room where Kyle had suggested I sleep, staring at the ceiling, feeling afraid and angry and strangely, powerfully alive. The game had officially begun. Kyle's lawyer sent the settlement proposal 3 days later. I read it in Helen's office, watching her face darken with each page. $50,000. The 10-year-old minivan. And a suggestion that I seek employment to support myself since I had been out of the workforce for an extended period. Nothing about the house, the investment properties, the offshore accounts, the business assets, the retirement funds. Just $50,000, as if 15 years of marriage and partnership meant nothing. Helen looked up at me, her expression fierce. "They're counting on you not knowing about the hidden assets. They think you'll be grateful for $50,000 and walk away quietly. This is insulting, and it's going to cost them dearly." "What do we do?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "We wait. We let them think this is working. You act scared, maybe even consider accepting. Then at the first mediation, we ask for discovery. Full financial discovery. We make them produce every bank statement, every property deed, every business record. And when they try to hide things or lie under oath, we hit them with everything we've already found." She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "They're playing checkers, Claire. We're playing chess. And they don't even know the game has started." I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not hope that my marriage could be saved, but hope that justice might actually be possible. That my voice might actually matter. Brace that I might actually win. The next weeks were agony, pretending to consider Kyle's insulting offer, acting confused and overwhelmed as he had expected. He moved out to an apartment he claimed was modest, but which I knew, thanks to Patricia's research, cost $4,000 a month and overlooked the harbor. Natasha helped him move, right in front of me, no longer bothering to hide their relationship. "I hope we can keep things friendly," Kyle said as he loaded the last box into his car. "For the kids' sake." I nodded, biting back the words I wanted to scream. Soon, I told myself. Soon he would understand exactly what I was capable of. Helen scheduled the first mediation for 2 weeks later. In that time, Patricia finished her forensic analysis, documenting every hidden account, every concealed property, every fraudulent transfer. We had built a case so comprehensive, so damning, that even Kyle's expensive lawyer wouldn't be able to dismiss it. The morning of the mediation, I dressed carefully in a simple dress that screamed, "Helpless housewife," pulled my hair back plainly, wore minimal makeup. I wanted them to underestimate me one last time. When I walked into that conference room and saw Kyle sitting beside his lawyer, both of them wearing expressions of confident superiority, I felt a cold calm settle over me. This was it. The moment when everything changed. When the lawyer made his dismissive comment about me being just a housewife, I smiled. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew exactly what was in that folder. Every document, every piece of evidence carefully organized to destroy their arrogant assumptions. And I knew that smile, that dismissal, that smirk, would be the last moment of confidence they would feel for a very long time. While Patricia had been tracking the properties, I had been investigating Natasha's role in Kyle's business more deeply. What I found went far beyond a simple affair. Natasha wasn't just sleeping with my husband. She was actively helping him commit fraud. I discovered that she had been falsifying company records for Kyle's real estate business, shifting profits away from the main company that was considered marital property and into a separate LLC that only Kyle and Natasha controlled. She created fake expense reports to justify moving money. She backdated contracts to make it appear profits had been earned by the new LLC rather than the marital business. She even helped Kyle create shell companies to purchase properties that would then be sold to his mother for suspiciously low prices. Every transaction was carefully documented in emails I had retrieved from Kyle's second phone, messages where they discussed the technical details of their schemes with casual confidence. Make sure the Portland property transfer shows it was purchased by Highland Investments, not Bennett Development, one email read. We can't have any more assets tied to the marital business. Another message was even more damning. Moved another $100K offshore today. At this rate, Claire won't be able to touch a third of our actual assets. Our assets? They had already started thinking of my marital property as theirs. When I showed these documents to Patricia and Helen, their reactions were immediate and severe. This is securities fraud, Patricia said quietly. This isn't just hiding assets in a divorce. They've been falsifying business records, which affects investors, partners, potentially clients. This could involve criminal charges. Helen nodded slowly. We need to be very careful about how we use this information. But Claire, this gives us enormous leverage. I needed one more piece of the puzzle, so I did something risky. I called Kyle's mother and asked to meet her for coffee. Diane agreed, probably curious about why her soon-to-be ex-daughter-in-law wanted to see her. We met at a cafe in her neighborhood, and I came prepared. I wore a wire, a small recording device Helen had provided, perfectly legal in our state, for recording conversations you're personally involved in. After small talk about the grandchildren, I carefully steered the conversation toward the divorce. I'm worried about the kids, I said, which was true. Kyle says his settlement offer is fair, but I'm not sure how I'll manage financially. Diane's expression was cool, superior. Kyle has been very generous considering you haven't worked in years. You should be grateful he's offering you anything. I took a sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch, then said carefully, I'm sure he's doing well with all his properties. The business seems to be thriving. That's when Diane made her mistake. Well, he has been smart about his investments. I've been holding some properties for him until the divorce is over, you understand? Just to keep things simple. My heart raced, but I kept my voice calm and confused. Holding properties? I don't understand. She waved a hand dismissively. Just some investment properties he wanted to keep separate from the business. Nothing you need to worry about. Once this is all settled, he'll transfer them back. I had her on tape, admitting that she was holding properties that belonged to Kyle, specifically to hide them from marital assets, until the divorce was over. She had just confessed to participating in asset concealment. I left that coffee meeting with my hands shaking, but my resolve stronger than ever. The worst discovery came 2 weeks before the first mediation. Patricia had been examining the financial statements for trust accounts Kyle had opened for our children's college funds. We had started those accounts when each child was born, putting money away regularly. I thought they were untouchable, sacred, dedicated to Emma and Tyler's futures. Patricia's voice was tight with controlled anger when she called. Claire, you need to sit down. The children's trust accounts show significant withdrawals over the past 3 years. My blood went cold. What do you mean, withdrawals? Those accounts were supposed to be locked until they turned 18. They were, until Kyle, as the trustee, started taking money out. He's removed almost $80,000 total from both accounts combined. I felt physically sick. What did he use it for? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Based on the dates of the withdrawals and cross-referencing with his credit card statements, which we obtained through discovery requests, it appears he was using the money to buy gifts for Natasha. Jewelry, trips, a car. He was funding his affair with his children's education money. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Everything else, the hidden properties, the offshore accounts, even the affair itself, had been about Kyle's greed and betrayal of me. But this was betraying Emma and Tyler. This was stealing from his own children to buy presents for his mistress. When I could finally talk, my voice was ice. I want him to pay for this. Every penny, with interest plus damages. I don't care what it takes. Helen's response was swift and fierce. Oh, he'll pay, Claire? When the judge hears about this, Kyle won't know what hit him. Stealing from your own children's trust funds is one of the worst things you can do in family court. The first mediation was held in a conference room at the courthouse. I sat across from Kyle and his lawyer, with Helen beside me, the weight of our evidence in the folder now in the judge's hands. Kyle's lawyer had spent the first hour presenting their position with elaborate condescension, talking about how I had contributed nothing tangible to the marriage, how Kyle's business success was entirely his own doing, how their settlement offer was actually quite generous considering my lack of workforce skills. The judge had listened patiently, making notes. Then he turned to me. Mrs. Bennett, do you accept this settlement offer? I looked directly at Kyle for the first time that day, seeing the expectation in his eyes that I would cave, would cry, would accept the crumbs he was offering. No, Your Honor, I do not accept. The lawyer's smirk widened. Mrs. Bennett, I have to tell you, if you refuse this offer and force us to trial, we'll present evidence that you've been living quite comfortably on your husband's income for years. The court is unlikely to be more generous than we're being now. Helen stood smoothly. Your Honor, my client is not refusing the settlement out of spite. We're refusing it because it's based on fraudulent financial disclosures. We're requesting full discovery. Complete access to all bank records, business records, property records, communication records, and financial statements for the past 7 years. The lawyer's smirk faltered. Your Honor, that's completely excessive and unnecessary. We've provided full financial disclosure. Helen pulled out a document from our folder. Have you? Then perhaps you can explain these 6 properties registered in Diane Bennett's name, purchased during the marriage with marital funds. The room went silent. Kyle's face drained of color. His lawyer leaned over to look at the document Helen held, and I saw panic flash across his features. Your Honor, Helen continued, we have reason to believe Mr. Bennett's systematically hiding marital assets. We're entitled to full discovery and we intend to get it. The judge granted our discovery request, and Helen's team filed subpoenas for every financial record Kyle had touched in the past 7 years. His bank accounts, business accounts, credit card statements, phone records, property records, investment accounts, and business partnership documents. Every text message, every email, every transaction would be examined. Kyle called me 2 days after the mediation, his voice shaking with rage. What the hell are you doing, Claire? You're making this ugly. Do you really want to drag our family through a messy court battle? Think about Emma and Tyler. I kept my voice steady, remembering how he had stolen from their college funds to buy gifts for his mistress. You made this ugly 2 years ago, when you started planning to cheat me out of what I'm legally entitled to. I'm just making it honest. This is going to cost us both a fortune in legal fees, he threatened. Maybe you should have thought about that before you hid millions of dollars in assets and tried to steal from your own children. There was a long silence. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Kyle. I know about the college fund withdrawals. I know about Natasha. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the properties in your mother's name. I know everything. I could hear his breathing quicken on the other end of the line. Claire, listen, maybe we can work something out. Maybe my lawyer was too aggressive with the first offer. We can negotiate something better. Oh, we'll negotiate all right. In court. Under oath, where lying has consequences. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking not with fear anymore, but with righteous anger. For 15 years I had been the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. That woman was gone. In her place was someone who knew her worth and would fight for every penny she deserved. The discovery process took 3 months, and with each week, Patricia and Helen uncovered more damning evidence. The phone records alone were devastating. thousands of calls and texts between Kyle and Natasha, many during business hours when he had told me he was in important meetings. Many during family vacations when he had disappeared to handle work emergencies. I read messages sent while I was hosting dinner parties for his business associates, while I was helping Emma with her homework, while I was managing every detail of our household so he could focus on building his career. Helen obtained the records through legal subpoenas, and they painted an undeniable picture of a years-long affair conducted brazenly under my nose. But more important than the affair itself was what the affair meant legally. Our state considered adultery a factor in asset division, meaning Kyle's infidelity could result in him getting less than 50% of our marital property. The business records were equally damning. Patricia's forensic analysis showed that Kyle and Natasha had been systematically shifting profits from Bennett Development, the company that should have been considered a marital asset, into a separate LLC called Highland Investments. The LLC was structured so that only Kyle and Natasha owned shares. None of the original business partners knew about it. "This is textbook fraud," Patricia explained during one of our strategy sessions. "They created a separate company, then used falsified contracts and backdated agreements to make it appear that profits rightfully belonging to Bennett Development were actually earned by Highland Investments. They've been doing this for at least 4 years. Helen looked at me seriously. "Claire, this goes beyond divorce law now. This is corporate fraud that affects other people's investments. We could report this to securities regulators, which might result in criminal charges for both Kyle and Natasha." 6 weeks before the trial date, Helen received the business valuation from an independent auditor the court had appointed. She called me immediately, her voice carrying barely contained excitement. "Claire, you're going to want to sit down for this. The auditor valued Bennett Development at $8 million. $8 million. Kyle's financial disclosure claimed the business was worth $2 million. My hands went numb. How was that possible? How could he lie about something so easily verifiable? He was counting on you not challenging it. He was counting on you being the obedient housewife who accepted whatever he told you. The auditor found that Kyle deliberately undervalued the business by using outdated comparables, hiding profitable contracts, and failing to account for properties the business owned." She paused. "The auditor's report also notes that the valuation discrepancy suggests possible fraud, and he's recommending further investigation." When Helen filed the valuation report with the court, Kyle's lawyer called requesting an emergency meeting. We met in a conference room 2 days later, and the change in Kyle's demeanor was stark. He looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, his usual confidence replaced with barely concealed panic. His lawyer kept clearing his throat, shuffling papers, trying to find solid ground. "Let's discuss a revised settlement," the lawyer began, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "We may have been working with incomplete information before." Helen leaned back in her chair, calm and predatory. "Incomplete information? Or deliberately falsified information?" The lawyer ignored the question. "My client is prepared to offer a 60-40 split of marital assets, including the business valuation." 60 for Claire, 40 for Kyle?" Helen asked. "Well, no, 40 for your client would be more standard in." Helen cut him off. "Standard in cases without fraud, without hidden assets, without adultery, without stealing from children's trust funds. But this isn't a standard case, is it?" She pulled out a document. "This is what we're proposing. 70% of all marital assets to Claire, including the business, the properties, and all offshore accounts. Full custody of the children with supervised visitation for Kyle until he completes counseling. Repayment of all money stolen from the children's college funds with interest. And Kyle pays all legal fees." Kyle spoke for the first time, his voice desperate. "That's insane. You're trying to take everything." Helen looked at him coldly. "No, Mr. Bennett. We're trying to give Claire what she's legally entitled to, after 15 years of building your career, while you systematically plan to rob her. If you don't like our terms, we'll see you in court." While preparing for trial, Patricia made another discovery that changed everything. She had been following a trail of wire transfers from Kyle's business accounts and found a pattern of large sums being moved to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. "This isn't new," Patricia explained during one of our late-night strategy sessions. "Kyle has been moving money offshore for 5 years. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers as he got bolder. The total amount currently sitting in these offshore accounts is approximately $2.7 million. I felt dizzy. How did he get away with moving that much money without me knowing? Because you trusted him to handle the business finances, and he structured the transfers to look like legitimate business expenses. Payments to international contractors, investment in foreign properties, fees to offshore consultants. All of it was fake. He was just moving marital assets beyond your reach." Helen was quiet for a long moment, then spoke carefully. "Claire, this moves beyond civil fraud. Kyle has been evading taxes on this offshore income. This is federal tax evasion. We could report this to the IRS, which would trigger an investigation that could result in criminal charges." I thought about Emma and Tyler, about how their father's potential imprisonment would affect them. But then I thought about how he had stolen from their college funds, about how he had been planning to leave me destitute, about how he had shown zero remorse for any of it. "What happens if we report it?" Helen explained that the IRS investigation would take time, but it would give us enormous leverage in the divorce. Kyle would be facing potential prison time and massive financial penalties. He would be desperate to settle the divorce favorably to avoid making his situation worse. "We don't have to report it immediately," Helen said. "We can use it as leverage in settlement negotiations. If he refuses to settle reasonably, we inform him that we have evidence of tax evasion and will be required to report it." Kyle's lawyer requested another emergency meeting the following week. This time, Kyle came alone. His lawyer had apparently told him he needed to negotiate directly, person to person. We met at Helen's office. Kyle looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive suit hung wrong, his hair was uncombed, and his hands shook slightly as he sat down across from me. "Claire, please, we need to talk rationally about this." I said nothing, just looked at him, seeing not the man I had loved, but the stranger who had been planning to destroy me. "I know I made mistakes. The affair was wrong. Hiding money was wrong. But destroying me won't help anyone. It won't help you, and it certainly won't help the kids." Helen started to speak, but I held up my hand. I wanted to respond to this myself. "Kyle, you didn't make mistakes. Mistakes are accidental. You made deliberate choices. For years, you chose to lie to me, to steal from me, to plan my financial ruin while I supported your career, raised your children, and built the foundation that made your success possible." My voice was steady, cold. "You chose to steal from Emma and Tyler's college funds to buy gifts for your mistress. You chose to hide millions of dollars while giving me a household allowance and making me feel guilty for spending money on groceries. You made all of these choices, and now you're facing the consequences." "What do you want?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I want everything I'm legally entitled to. I want the 70% of assets that reflects your fraud and misconduct. I want full custody of our children. I want the college funds restored with interest. And I want you to pay my legal fees." I leaned forward. "But more than that, Kyle, I want you to understand something. I was never just a housewife. I was the infrastructure that made your entire life possible. And now you're going to pay for trying to take that for granted." 2 weeks before the trial date, something unexpected happened. Natasha called me. I was so shocked when I saw her name on my caller ID that I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won out. "Hello?" Her voice was tight, scared, nothing like the confident woman I remembered from business dinners. "Claire, I need to talk to you. Please, don't hang up." I put her on speaker so Helen, who was with me, could hear. "What do you want, Natasha?" "I want to tell you that I'm cooperating with your legal team. I've given them access to all the business records, all the communications between Kyle and me about hiding assets. Everything." I was stunned into silence. Helen raised her eyebrows, impressed. Natasha continued, her words tumbling out rapidly. "I didn't fully understand what Kyle was doing at first. I thought we were just restructuring the business. But then I realized he was committing fraud, and when your lawyers started asking questions, I knew I could face criminal charges. My own lawyer told me the only way to protect myself was to cooperate fully with your side. So you're betraying Kyle to save yourself? I said flatly. Yes. At least she was honest. Claire, I'm not asking for your forgiveness or your understanding. I know what I did was wrong. The affair, helping him hide money, all of it. But I'm telling you this so you know that Kyle has no one left on his side. His business partners are distancing themselves because they're worried about the fraud investigation. His mother is furious because the properties in her name mean she could face legal consequences too. And now I'm testifying against him. After she hung up, Helen looked at me with something close to admiration. Kyle's entire support system just collapsed. Everyone who helped him is now either turning on him or running away. He's completely isolated. I felt no satisfaction. Only a cold certainty that justice was coming. The legal filings from our case had become public record, and word was spreading through Kyle's professional community. Real estate was a small world in our city, and everyone knew everyone. Helen started getting calls from reporters wanting to know about the case. Kyle's business associates began calling me, some to express shock, others to quietly distance themselves from him. One of Kyle's oldest business partners, a man named Gerald who had been at our wedding, called me personally. Claire, I just want you to know that several of us are reviewing our partnerships with Kyle. If he's been falsifying records and hiding money in your divorce, we need to know if he's been doing the same thing with business funds. The implications were enormous. If Kyle's business partners started their own investigation, they might discover that his fraud extended beyond our marital assets. I appreciate you telling me, I said carefully. I think you're wise to protect yourselves. Within a week, 3 major deals Kyle had been working on fell through. Clients who had been loyal for years started taking their business elsewhere. His reputation, which he had spent 15 years building, was crumbling under the weight of his exposed lies. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Kyle had stopped going to his office, that he was working from home, that he looked defeated and desperate. Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy for the man I had once loved. But then I would remember his voice from that night, laughing, as he planned to leave me with nothing. And the sympathy would evaporate. He had made these choices. He had built this house of cards. Now it was collapsing around him, and I felt no obligation to help him pick up the pieces. Kyle's mother called me for the first time since the divorce proceedings began. Her voice was shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. Claire, we need to talk about this situation. You're destroying my son's life, and for what? Revenge? Money? What will that solve? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Diane, I'm not destroying Kyle's life. He destroyed it himself when he chose to commit fraud. The properties in your name, the ones you're holding for him until the divorce is over. Remember telling me about those? That makes you complicit in asset concealment. Your lawyer has probably told you that you could face legal consequences. She was quiet for a moment. He told me it was legal, that it was just smart financial planning. It wasn't legal, Diane, and now you're part of this mess. Those properties will need to be disclosed as marital assets, and you'll need to cooperate fully, or you could be charged with fraud too. Her voice turned pleading. Please, Claire, be reasonable. Kyle made mistakes, but he's still the father of your children. Do you really want to take everything from him? How will that help Emma and Tyler? I felt my anger rise, sharp and hot. Don't you dare use my children to manipulate me. Kyle stole from their college funds to buy gifts for his mistress. He was willing to leave them without the education money we had carefully saved. He made choices that hurt them, not me. I'm begging you, Diane said, crying now. Don't destroy him completely. Let's settle this reasonably. We've offered him a settlement, I said coldly. He's refused. If he wants to avoid further legal consequences, he knows what he needs to do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have nothing more to say to you. I hung up, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. 1 week before the trial, the judge ordered a closed session with Emma and Tyler to hear their preferences regarding custody. Helen had explained that, while the judge wouldn't necessarily follow their wishes exactly, their testimony about their relationship with each parent would be considered. I was terrified about what this might do to them emotionally, but Helen assured me the judge would be gentle and that a child psychologist would be present. After the session, which I wasn't allowed to attend, Helen called me to her office. Her expression was somber. "Claire, I need to tell you what happened in that session because it's going to be part of the court record." My heart pounded. "What did they say?" They were very clear about their father's absence from their lives over the past few years. Emma told the judge that Kyle missed most of her volleyball games, that he was always on his phone during family dinners, that he made promises to spend time with her and then canceled. Tyler said he couldn't remember the last time his father helped him with homework or came to one of his soccer matches. Helen paused. They also talked about noticing their father being secretive, seeing him text someone constantly and hide his phone. Emma said she knew something was wrong in your marriage before you did because she could see how distant her father had become from the whole family, not just from you. Tears streamed down my face. I tried to protect them from all of this. I know you did, but Claire, their testimony about Kyle's character and his lack of involvement in their daily lives will significantly impact the custody determination. The judge could see that Kyle has been absent and distracted, and that gives weight to your request for primary custody. It hurt to know my children had suffered from Kyle's deception too, but it also strengthened my resolve to protect them moving forward. 3 days before the trial was scheduled to begin, Kyle's lawyer called Helen with a new settlement offer. They wanted to meet immediately. We gathered in the same conference room where this had all started months ago. Kyle looked broken, a shadow of the confident man who had smirked at me during the first mediation. His lawyer spoke quickly, clearly wanting to get this over with. "We're prepared to offer a revised settlement. 60% of all marital assets to Mrs. Bennett. Full restoration of the children's college funds with a 6% interest penalty. Primary custody to Mrs. Bennett with standard visitation for Mr. Bennett, and Mr. Bennett will pay half of Mrs. Bennett's legal fees." Helen didn't even pause. "Not good enough. The offer we presented weeks ago still stands. 70% full custody with supervised visitation until Mr. Bennett completes counseling, complete restoration of college funds with interest, and Mr. Bennett pays all legal fees. Additionally, we want a clause requiring full financial transparency for the next 5 years and immediate liquidation of all offshore accounts with those funds returned to the marital estate." Kyle's lawyer looked at his client, who sat with his head in his hands. "Mr. Bennett, I need your authorization to accept or counter this offer." But I wasn't done. I leaned forward, looking directly at Kyle. "There's one more thing. I want full control of Bennett Development. You keep your share of the business equity, but I become the managing partner with final say on all business decisions. You can work there or not, that's your choice. But the company that I helped build will not be used to commit fraud anymore." Kyle finally looked up, his eyes red. "Claire, that business is my entire life. It was my life too. For 15 years, every dinner party I hosted, every connection I helped you make, every sacrifice I made so you could work late or travel for deals, I invested in that business just as much as you did. The difference is, I didn't lie about it." Helen spoke firmly. "Mr. Bennett, you have 2 choices. Accept this settlement, or we go to trial. And if we go to trial, we'll be introducing evidence of tax evasion, and we'll be required to report it to federal authorities. Choose carefully." The trial began on a cold Monday morning in late October. Despite weeks of negotiations, Kyle had refused the final settlement offer, convinced apparently that he could win in court. I think he genuinely believed that a judge would side with him, would see him as the hard-working businessman and me as the gold-digging ex-wife. He had always underestimated me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal, with harsh fluorescent lighting that made everything feel stark and real. I sat beside Helen at the plaintiff's table while Kyle and his lawyer sat across the aisle. The gallery was mostly empty except for a few reporters who had gotten wind of the case. Helen's opening statement was precise and devastating. She laid out the timeline of Kyle's deception, the hidden assets, the falsified business records, the offshore accounts, the affair, the theft from our children's college funds. She spoke for 20 minutes, and by the end, the judge's expression had darkened considerably. Kyle's lawyer tried to paint a different picture in his opening statement. He talked about Kyle's business acumen, his hard work, his contributions to the community. He tried to characterize me as vengeful and money-hungry, as someone who had lived comfortably for years and now wanted to punish her ex-husband. But his arguments felt hollow against the weight of the evidence Helen had already introduced. Then came the testimony. Helen called Patricia first, who walked the judge through her forensic analysis of Kyle's finances with clinical precision. She showed how money had been systematically moved from marital accounts to hidden investments, from the main business to separate LLCs, from domestic banks to offshore havens. Every transfer was documented, dated, traced. Kyle's lawyer tried to cross-examine her, to suggest her analysis was flawed or biased, but Patricia was unshakable. She had the receipts, literally and figuratively, for every claim she made. On the second day of trial, Helen called her most damaging witness, Natasha. I watched Kyle's face as his former lover and business partner walked to the witness stand. He looked betrayed, angry, and afraid all at once. Under Helen's questioning, Natasha detailed the affair, the planning, the deliberate fraud. She admitted helping Kyle falsify business records, helping him create shell companies, helping him plan how to hide assets from me. Did Mr. Bennett ever express concern about how his actions might affect his wife financially? Helen asked. Natasha looked down. He said she would be fine, that she would probably remarry quickly and find someone else to support her. He said she had gotten used to an easy life and needed to learn independence. The courtroom was silent. Helen continued. Did you ever discuss the children's college funds? Yes. Kyle told me the money in those accounts was just sitting there doing nothing, and that he could replace it later. He used about $40,000 from Emma's account and $40,000 from Tyler's account over 2 years to buy gifts for me, to pay for trips we took together, and to lease a car for me. Were you aware these were funds designated for his children's education? Yes. He said Claire was too rigid about money, that he earned it so he could use it however he wanted. The judge's face was stone, but I could see anger flickering in his eyes. Kyle's lawyer tried to discredit Natasha during cross-examination, to suggest she was testifying to save herself from criminal charges. But the problem was, everything she said was corroborated by documents, by bank records, by text messages. Her testimony wasn't speculation, it was confession. The trial lasted 5 days. On the final day, both sides presented their closing arguments. Helen stood before the judge and spoke with quiet fury. Your Honor, this case represents a systematic pattern of fraud, deception, and betrayal that went on for years. Mr. Bennett didn't just hide assets from his wife, he stole from his own children. He falsified business records. He committed tax evasion. He built a secret financial empire while his wife managed their household on a modest allowance, believing they were being careful with money. Mrs. Bennett gave up her career as a financial analyst to support her husband's dreams, to raise their children, to create the stable foundation that allowed him to succeed. And he repaid her loyalty by planning to leave her with nothing. This court has the opportunity to send a clear message that this behavior will not be tolerated, that marriage is a partnership, and that deliberately defrauding your spouse has severe consequences. Kyle's lawyer made one last attempt to salvage his client's case, but his argument felt weak, desperate. The judge called for a recess to consider the evidence. We waited for 3 hours in a small conference room, Helen reviewing her notes while I sat numbly, unable to believe we had finally reached this point. When we were called back into the courtroom, the judge's expression was severe. He looked directly at Kyle as he began to speak. Mr. Bennett, I have reviewed the extensive evidence presented in this case, and I find your conduct to be appalling. You systematically deceived your wife, hid marital assets, falsified business records, committed tax evasion, and stole from your own children's education funds. Your actions demonstrate a complete disregard for your family, your marriage vows, and the law. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and brutal. 70% of all marital assets to me, including 70% equity in Bennett Development. Full custody of Emma and Tyler, with supervised visitation for Kyle until he completed 6 months of counseling. Complete restoration of the children's college funds with compound interest at 8% annually. Kyle, responsible for all legal fees, mine and his. An order requiring Kyle to liquidate all offshore accounts within 90 days, with the funds to be divided according to the 70-30 split. And a referral to the IRS for investigation of possible tax evasion. Kyle's lawyer asked for a recess, but it was too late. The judgment was final. 6 months after the trial ended, I stood in the garden of my new home watching Emma and Tyler play with our dog, a golden retriever puppy they had named Justice, as a joke that made me laugh and cry at the same time. The house I had purchased with my settlement money was smaller than the one Kyle and I had shared, but it felt more like home than that showcase property ever had. It was mine, earned through years of work and months of fighting for what I deserved. Kyle's business had collapsed under the weight of the scandal and the IRS investigation. His professional reputation was destroyed. He had lost most of his clients, and his business partners had forced him out. Last I heard, he was working for a property management company, a regular employee rather than the owner he had once been. His mother had been required to transfer all 6 properties to the marital estate, and while she avoided criminal charges, her relationship with Kyle was apparently strained. She had sent me a letter 2 months ago apologizing for her role in the deception and asking if she could see her grandchildren. I had agreed, not for her sake or Kyle's, but because Emma and Tyler deserved to have their grandmother in their lives, if she could be a positive presence. Natasha had avoided criminal charges by cooperating fully with authorities, but her career in real estate was finished. No one would work with someone who had admitted to falsifying business records. The best revenge, I had learned, wasn't in their punishment, but in my freedom. I had started working again, consulting for a financial analysis firm that valued my experience and skills. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways I had forgotten were possible. Emma was thriving in school, no longer watching her parents pretend everything was fine. Tyler had joined a new soccer league and was actually smiling again. They saw Kyle every other weekend under supervision, and while the relationship was strained, it was honest now, which was better than the lies we had all been living with. My phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "Coffee next week? I have another client who could use your insight about recognizing hidden assets." I smiled. Maybe I could help someone else the way Patricia had helped me. The woman Kyle's lawyer had dismissed as just a housewife had discovered she was so much more. Financial analyst, strategist, mother, fighter, survivor. I had taken control of my own story, and I was writing a new chapter that belonged entirely to me. The sun was setting over my garden, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Emma called out asking if we could have dinner outside, and Tyler was already setting up the patio table. This was my life now. Not perfect, not what I had imagined 15 years ago when I said I do. But honest, hard-won, and truly mine. And that was worth more than any fortune Kyle had tried to hide.